Miller, present.
Good afternoon, Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Hello, how's Paula? Hello.
I think she's good.
I thought I hit unmute and I hit mute, but I'm good, Linda. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, you know, you never know nowadays.
Did you get your allergies under control?
No, never will. As long as I've got a forest of lilacs across the street from me, the orchards are in bloom, and cottonwoods flying all over the place.
Oh dear.
It's
I'm
just
sorry to
something
hear
I deal
that.
with. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Well,
It's a windy day out there. Were you able to keep yourselves down, bolted down to the ground?
Yeah, luckily I have a giant maple tree in my backyard that is looming over my house. So every time there's a big windstorm, always causes a little bit of stress, but
Yeah. I don't know if this is the worst wind I've experienced here or not, but it's up there. It's probably in the top 5. This probably isn't the worst wind you all know. So
this summer it'll pick up, definitely. Yeah, usually, yeah, in the summer, especially when all the kiteboarders are all around. That's why they're here. So
yeah. I drove through the gorge this afternoon, and the waves were big. They were out there having a good time. So.
is that Linda on the phone?
yes.
It is.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. So we got Linda, Carly, and Cody. We have a quorum, but I'd like to wait a few more minutes and see if anyone else shows up. So Alice, I put in my calendar a week after the actual city council meeting to be at the city council meeting. So I apologize for not being present for that. But I hope everything went well during the meeting.
It went just fine. Yeah, it was fine. So we can talk some more at another time. Probably better to do it then.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if we're live yet, but I'm guessing we are.
Yeah. Yep.
You are.
All right. And I see Alan on there. imagine Philip will show up, and let's see. Let's see if Mark shows as well. But I mean, we have a quorum, so let's get underway. It's 5:31. I'll call the meeting to order. Is Paula here tonight?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. I can't see your face. We'll start with a roll call.
Carly Aparicio,
Present.
Brent Bybee,
Present.
Alan Eastling,
Present.
Cody Cornett,
Present.
Philip Mosher is absent, Linda Miller,
Here.
and Mark Popoff is absent.
So, and we'll see if those folks show up here in a few minutes or during the meeting. And if so, then we'll make it known, Paula. Okay, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. You can see the flag up there on the screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So after that, we have approval of the agenda for the evening. Does anyone have any edits, or does staff have any edits for the agenda?
Nope.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion?
Miller will move to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay.
I second that.
Okay. It was moved by Linda and seconded by Cody. All those in favor, raise your right hand or say aye.
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 Okay. It's unanimous. And next we'll move to approval of the March 18th, 2021 meeting minutes. Are there any edits for that from the commissioners or staff? And if not, would anyone like to entertain a motion? And I see, is that Mark that just joined us down there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So Paula, Mark is present now. Mark, we're in the middle of approval of the March 18th, 2021 minutes.
Okay. Well, I vote for approving.
You make a motion to approve it?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. It was moved by Mark, seconded by Carly. All those in favor, raise your right hand or say aye.
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 I want to, but I wasn't here. So
Okay. Yeah, I would abstain then, Cody.
yeah, Cody abstains.
Okay, so everyone else votes yes, and Cody abstained. Paula. Okay, next up is public comment. I see Roger Nichols down there. Roger, did you have anything for us, or are you just here to observe?
I'm just here in my capacity as a reporter. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, seeing that there's no one else present, we'll move on to staff comments and project updates.
Okay, sorry, can I interject real quick? Mark, will you hold that phone away from your mouth a little bit, brother? Please. Thanks, dude.
Thank you. All right, we'll go with staff comments and project updates.
Yes, Chair Bybee, I'm just making some notes here. A few different updates here. At the Urban Renewal Board meeting this week, the Urban Renewal Board approved an extension or another addendum to what's called the Development and Disposition Agreement. So it's our agreement with the developers of the rec building. So the rec building is that if you've driven along 2nd Street across from Discounts Plus, right next to the, sitting between the Granada Theater and the Last Stop Saloon, there's a section of building that looks like it's boarded up. That particular section of building is going to be under development. We've reached agreement with the developer on a new schedule, and they are ready to get going within the next, I would say, 60 days. They expect to be finished with, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. They expect to be finished with the 2 eastern, the 2 storefronts that are closest to the Granada Theater by November 30th. So that's their milestone completion date. We're really excited. We've been told that one of those, particularly I'm excited, one of those tenants in one of the storefronts will be a ice cream and candy store. So that's pretty sweet. So that means that we'll have 2 ice cream stores within a couple of blocks here, and that's wonderful. So I know there's a new ice cream store that will soon be opening, or is open, right across from the Civic Theater. So, and I've been told they have non-dairy ice cream, which is something I like. So anyway, there you go. And so we're pretty jazzed about this, and so you can expect to be seeing some change on the ground here shortly. The remaining storefront, which is the wider storefront that sits between the Last Stop, well, immediately east of the Last Stop, we're still working on the design solution for that, and they aren't behind on their schedule for delivery of that building, so they're moving along according to the schedule, and I expect they will meet the schedule that's in the development agreement. So off we go. It's an exciting time, and we continue to work on the First Street project, and that's the reconstruction of the street between First Street between Union and Laughlin. We're in the design phase, and we'll be expecting to be under construction in 2023. I may have already told you that, and I know that's been a long time coming. We've had some federal money for that project since 2007, 2008. So we're moving along, but I can assure you we feel pretty confident we're going to be able to have that project delivered in summer 2023 or fall. So more to come as we proceed with that. And the other project that will be coming before you soon, it's a high priority to our city council. It came up at their goal setting session in January. As you know, the council approved the construction of the pallet shelters in the industrial portion of the city along the riverfront. There's some property. Is it along Terminal Avenue? I'm trying to remember, Dawn, or
That is correct. Yes. In terminal right away. Oh, we can't hear you, Alice.
Still can't hear you, Alice.
Alice, can
Okay.
you check your, there you
Oh,
are.
there we go. There we go.
yeah, it looked like my internet was unstable there for a second. Sorry about that. Just wave your arms or let me know if that happens again. So we have an agreement with the MCAC, the Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, I think it's called. That group is now operating the pallet shelters, and there was originally a plan to have those serve as just warming shelters for the season, but seeing the need to keep them open, Mid-Columbia Community Action has received a grant to keep it open through the summer months and serve more as a cooling shelter. And there is a real need for it. So we reached a resolution and an amendment to the agreement we have for them to continue to operate in the right-of-way. So it's not a section of right-of-way that we use. So it's if you've ever seen them, they're out of the way and they're not in any traffic or anything. So that's moving forward. However, there is a need for us to have in our land use code some recognition for this type of housing if it is to occur on private property. So that's what is regulated by the land use ordinance that you all have some oversight over. We do not currently have a land use category that recognizes shelter housing or supportive housing. So that is something that we will be bringing forward we're going to probably likely add 2 new land uses, and one would be the shelter housing that would occur in a permanent building.
Alice, we've lost you again.
Memo out to both the council and to you all.
Excuse me, Director
Yeah,
Cannon, we lost the last part. Can you repeat yourself, please?
I will, and then I'll move. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we lost permanent building.
Okay, so the permanent building, there are 2 types of uses. There is the shelter use in a permanent building, and then there are the uses that are in a temporary building like the pallet shelters. So we want to have an allowance or some type of land use defined, as well as some standards defined for that. So we'll be bringing these code amendments forward in June, likely in June. And our council, it's a high priority to them. And so we're going to move more briskly than we might with a different code amendment, where we would come in work session first. We may just come with a code amendment to you. We've done a lot of research. Caitlin, our newest planner, and Dawn have done a lot of research in other communities, and feel pretty good about some standards of like-sized cities like Hermiston and Pendleton that we're bringing. It's apples to apples comparison, as opposed to bringing something from a big city like Portland or Eugene, so to speak. So more to come on that. We'll get a memo out to you at the same time we get it out to the council, and that we're not even going to go to work session at council. We're going to just share a memo with them unless we hear differently. So you'll see this, and we'll be getting the notices started on this soon. So the other thing I wanted to tell you, and this was a really good question raised by Commissioner Aparicio, and that is, she was asking, is there any state legislation like House Bill 2001 where we can expect to have to comply with state law soon and within the coming year? And my short answer is, there is, the legislative session isn't over yet, so I don't really know the wrap up and what the mop up is going to look like. But what we do know is there's a House Bill 2006 that, if it passes, and I expect that it will in some form, will kind of be more directive to local governments and require us to accept shelter housing and to allow it within the city, shelter housing, and also the transitional temporary type structures for housing purposes. So more to come. We want to kind of get ahead of the game and adopt some standards locally before we're required to. And then if we need to go back and adjust, we will. But it's been important to our council to get this done and get it underway, so that if more parties want to come to the table and bring in some services, that we have proper code in place to allow it on private property. So really that's, I will come back, Commissioner Aparicio and the rest of the commission, with a legislative report. Usually we get a really nice report from League of Oregon Cities that summarizes what happened during the legislative session. So we'll be able to provide a report and maybe even invite a member of the State Department of Land Conservation and Development to come and give us a report on that legislation as well. So happy to answer any questions you might have about any of those things. Oh, and Josh and I continue to work on the Tony's building. As I may have told you before, there's interest from our commission to demolish that building and make way for a redevelopment site for new housing units and some ground floor, either restaurant, retail, or service use, office use.
I do have a couple questions, Alice, quick ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think the redevelopment plan for First Avenue was probably before my time. Is that something that's accessible to us? I would love to take a look at that.
Very timely. Thank you for the question. We're going to be providing an update and a report to our Urban Renewal Board next month. So why don't we do the same report here and I can just provide the same PowerPoint and give you a little bit of information on it.
Fantastic.
What I will say, and with a smile, sort of, is that we're pretty far into the design, and so we have had some workshops over the years with various groups, and so making changes to the design is, well, it's not going to work very well for us to do it at this late date. So, with all due respect, but I feel pretty pleased with this design. It'll allow for on-street parking and considerable space for bike use and pedestrian use. So,
oh, cool. That sounds great. Yeah, would love to see that. And then my other question was, my understanding when last I heard about this is that the wrecked part of the rec building, it needs to be torn down. Is that correct? The third that the roof collapsed on.
a lot of it is torn down. If you actually look through the storefront, you can see through some gaps in the boards there, and you'll see that there is no roof above it, and it's just basically some plywood, and there isn't much there now as it is.
So that will be a complete rebuild, basically?
Yes, and we'll know more. Next month, we're taking to the Urban Renewal Board a discussion of what to do with that space and how to redevelop it and fit into the streetscape there.
Got it. Thank you.
And there are some really interesting, fun ideas that Mr. Carpenter and Ms. McQuaid have that I'm excited about. And maybe I can bring that out as well, because by that time, let's see, it'll be the same week that the Urban Renewal Board meets. So maybe I can just share those drawings with you, and it'll be 2 days after, so you can see them as well.
Awesome. Thank you. That's it for me.
Well, that's great to hear that project's moving forward. I know we all drive by it all the time and wonder when that's going to pick back up. So that's good to hear. Were there any other questions from the commissioners for staff? Jumping up. So, okay, we will move into, I guess we already covered commissioner comments and questions. So we'll just move into resolution 596-21, denial of variance 129-21 for the Meyer Sign Company of Oregon. Do you need me to recite anything for this, staff, or are we simply taking a vote on it? I always get a little mixed up with these.
Chair, you're taking a vote on this. We had the wrong resolution in the last packet, and that's okay. We have time now to consider this resolution, which is consistent with the decision you made at the last meeting, which was on March 18th. The board voted to deny the variance 129-21. So this resolution is in support of that. And let me just read the resolution title to you. Let me get to that in my packet. Sorry. Should be a little further along here. Oop. 1 second. Okay, so resolution number PC 596-21. Denial of variance application VAR 129-21, Meyer Sign Company of Oregon to install an additional sign on an existing freestanding sign, resulting in the total sign area exceeding the maximum allowed size of the subject property. Property is located at 3213 Brett Clodfelter Way, The Dalles, Oregon, and is further described as 1 North, 13 East, 1AB, tax lot 400. The property is zoned CG, General Commercial District. So we're seeking your consideration of this resolution, and which is concurrent with the decision you made at the March 18th meeting to deny this application.
Okay. Do the commissioners have any motions for this resolution?
A motion to, I have to make sure I do this right. A motion to approve resolution 596-21, which is the denial of variance 129-21.
Perfect. It's been moved by Alan. Is there a second?
I'll second, Philip.
Okay. Seconded by Philip. All those in favor, raise your right hand or say aye.
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 Okay. And it was unanimous. Okay. So we can go forward on that. And next we'll move into our discussion item. And it looks like it's fairly shorter than last time. So hopefully we can get this through this pretty quick. I'll leave it up to you, Matt.
All right, thank you. Give me just one moment and I will share my screen. All right. Everybody see that cover slide?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, hold on one sec. I'm gonna just make sure I can see all of you. There we go. All right. So yes, I mean we're back again to review kind of the combination of all the things that we've been reviewing. We're gonna give a pretty light touch to the things that we've already sort of talked about and pretty much gotten recommendation or concurrence or guidance on, and really just focus on a few things, either that we hadn't come to consensus or agreement on, and or there's a couple things that are new or that we didn't bring back to you at the last meeting. So we'll talk about those in a little more detail, and we'll do what we can. See how everybody feels. If we get agreement, that's great. If we don't, that's going to be okay too. And that's just what we'll ultimately present kind of to you all at the hearing, and also to the council if we need to get some direction. So that's kind of the approach. And we organized the last memo we sent to you with first the kind of the duplex related amendments, the stuff that's really required to meet the House Bill 2001 requirements, and then the triplex and quadplex and townhome amendments, and then kind of the code cleanup review amendments. And again, we're going to focus on the things that that we didn't get agreement or resolution on, and just kind of quickly touch on the other things, and then we'll do a quick next steps when we get to the end. So that's my plan. See how that goes. Just a quick reminder of time is moving forward. We're at our kind of next to the last meeting with you all. The next meeting will be a public hearing to review actual proposed amendments to the code. So we're doing great. I can't remember the date of that. It's May 24th. Did I get that right? Am I close? So it's your second meeting in May, basically. Will be that meeting, and then we'll be taking something to council on the 14th of June, hoping to get everything adopted then. But we've got kind of a fallback second opportunity with council just before the end of June, which is when the deadline for adoption from DLCD is. So that's kind of what you see on the schedule here. Although it shows that council meeting at the end of May, it's really going to be in the middle of June. So that's where we are there. So just kind of, I'll start out with a quick review of the things that we've already talked about and kind of already addressed. We aren't planning on spending a lot of time on these, but if you do have any quick final comments, we're happy to hear them. But this is just a list of the things that we've already done in terms of addressing the duplex requirements. So we expanded the definition to allow for detached duplex units. We updated the minimum lot size for both single family and detached, for both single family detached units and duplexes to make them the same size. And we talked about that a fair bit the last meeting. Reduced the minimum parking requirements to 2 off-street spaces for duplexes, address some clear and objective standards issues, some terms that were not meeting that statewide requirement for having clear and objective standards, exempted duplexes from residential density standards, and really density measured in minimum lot size for duplexes. So it's not that there is no density requirement, it's just that your code doesn't have a requirement measured in density for them. And then there were a couple other things we did just to make sure they're being treated the same way that single family detached homes are. One is to apply, well, there's a couple of things that are applied to single family detached homes that will also be applied to duplexes. So the temporary family hardship provision and landscaping prior to occupancy exemption. So those are both exemptions that would apply to duplexes as well. So that's just kind of a quick list of all the things we talked about earlier related to duplexes, and again, got some good direction from y'all on. So any questions about any of that before I move on to the next item?
Yeah, I have a question about the landscape requirements. Why are we exempting the duplexes from that?
Because with this particular exemption, and we didn't write out the whole thing in terms of what you're not exempting them from all landscaping requirement. It's exempting them from landscaping has to be in prior to occupancy, but you already do that for single family detached units. So if you do that for single family detached units, you need to do it for duplexes as well per the state requirements. So it's not, you're not exempting them from landscaping overall.
Oh, okay.
That specific requirement, or again, you already have the exemption for single family detached. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. So this next item is something that we hadn't finished talking about. So the state requirements require that you allow conversion of single family detached homes to duplexes, and you've got some language in your code, or we've got some recommended language in the code related to the conditions under which you can have the conversions occur. So there's kind of a couple, I'll read through them briefly. Permitted under the following conditions in all these zones, it's allowed. The second item is one that we want to get some feedback from you on. The conversion to a duplex shall not increase non-conformance with current development standards. The other one's conversion is exempt from additional design standards. That's pretty typical. Separate utility connections provided for the additional unit, and separate entry provided for the additional unit, either the front or the side. That one we talked about earlier. So I guess there's kind of two discussion questions potentially here. One, is there anything else that we think is important? And two, on number two, there is kind of a, impact potentially with saying that it shall not increase nonconformance with current development standards, particularly parking, so if by allowing for it, you need to add parking spaces, additional off-street parking spaces, that can just be difficult to accommodate. Now, in a lot of cases, since you've required 2 spaces for single family detached units, it's not going to be an issue because that's what duplexes are required to have as well. But there could be kind of other issues there, and we just want to see if it's important to have that requirement related to conversions, given that it could make it difficult to do some of the conversions. So anything to add to that, Dawn, Alice, or Josh? Yeah. So just any thoughts on that one in particular?
I have some thoughts on this. I'm not really a fan of converting existing single-family houses into duplexes. One thing, to do it properly is going to cost almost as much as starting from scratch. And the other thing is that you're basically eating into your existing supply of affordable owner-occupied housing.
So definitely appreciate the comments. I will say that it's not really an option to not allow for the conversion. You actually are required to allow for the conversion per the state administrative rules. The question here is, do you want to retain this requirement that the conversion will not increase the nonconformance with current development standards? That's really kind of the main question here. Or are there any other conditions on the conversions that you think are important? But for good or ill, we cannot say that you cannot allow for the conversion. So I just want to clarify that.
Hey, Matt, it might help if maybe the commission had an example of, for the nonconformist one, maybe an example of how that would come into play.
Sure. Don, any thoughts? I mean, parking's one where, you want to convert, but you've got a non-conforming situation where there's only one street parking on the site, and you'd have to add another one to make it a duplex, and you don't have space to put in another off-street parking site or parking space given the configuration of the lot, and therefore you wouldn't be able to do the conversion because you couldn't physically get the second parking space in. So that's one example. Any others you can think about?
Definitely. That is the one. And Josh and I did interject when we had met with Matt and Brandon, and pretty much the biggest obstacle that we've seen is that people that want to do a conversion to a duplex, basically it'll kill the deal when we require the parking because the primary structure doesn't have parking.
Okay, that's a good example. I was making sure I'm unmuted. That's a good example. I appreciate that. Do the commissioners have any comments or questions towards that portion of what Matt is requesting?
Yeah, I tend to want to keep it the way it is. So it shall not increase nonconformance with the current standards. And if they want to apply for a variance, they can.
Well, because we also, in one of your previous slides, we reduced the parking minimum to duplexes down to 2, right? Okay. So yeah, I mean, I would agree. We're already reducing it down from what it was prior to. I can understand some of the commissioners' stance on that. Are there any other commissioners that have input on that? I'm seeing head shakes and hearing crickets. I mean, I guess no. Matt, what kind of answer are you looking for on this?
I mean, I think if, the folks who have spoken say, hey, that's an okay provision, let's keep it the way it is, and I'm not hearing other people have a big issue with it, then we would just move forward with this language.
Okay. Would the commissioners feel comfortable with keeping the language the way it is? And if I'll go around the horn, Alan.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Linda.
I just conversion to duplex only, not a triplex.
This is just specific to duplex, yeah.
Specifically, then I agree.
Okay, and Mark.
Yeah, I would just leave it the way it is.
Okay, and Cody.
I'm fine with as is.
Okay, and Carly, and then we got Philip after that.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay, and Philip?
Yeah, fine here.
Okay, there you go, Matt.
Great, thank you. All right, kind of the next one is just to kind of summarize the things that we've already talked about related to triplexes and quadplexes, and just note all of these except for the second bullet are things we got good agreement and guidance from you on previously. The parking one we're going to talk about more in a minute. But reducing the minimum lot size per unit in the RH and the RM zone, we talked about that, got good guidance on that. Same thing with the reductions in the minimum lot width and removing the 30% open space requirement for quadplexes, and also applying the same landscaping requirements to triplexes and quadplexes that you apply to single family detached and duplexes. So got direction from you on all those, just kind of noting we're moving forward with all of them. And then the one where we will talk a little further is the parking, off-street parking requirements. So I'll do that in just a moment. But before I do, any questions on any of these?
Yeah, why would we be removing or reducing the open space requirements for quadplexes?
So I think both that and the landscaping requirements, the idea is really to treat those forms of housing more similarly to the way you treat duplexes and single family detached homes, because they're similar types of housing as opposed to kind of how you treat larger multifamily complexes. And so that's the rationale there. So we talked about that, I think, the last time we met, and seemed to get good agreement on that. But that was the thinking there. It was the same thing with applying the same landscaping, the same types of landscaping requirement standards to triplexes and quadplexes that you do to duplexes and single family detached.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I'm gonna move on to everybody's favorite subject, parking. You will, I'm sure, recall we talked about several options, 3 options, I guess. My kids would probably say that's not several, that's a few. They're very precise about the words I use. So 3 options we talked about, and they go from kind of lowest number of spaces to highest. One would be to reduce the off-street parking requirements to 1 space per unit for triplexes and quadplexes. The second would be 2 spaces for the first unit, 1 for each additional unit thereafter. The third would be 1.5 spaces per unit. That's kind of it's a little less than you require now, but it's also more than the other 2. We had a fair bit of discussion about this last time. Ultimately, and I'm going to show you some graphics in just a moment to talk about this a little further. And it reminds me that I didn't get a replacement graphic for one of those, but I'll describe it. Sorry about that. So the staff consultant recommendation is option number 2. We heard different opinions from y'all at the last meeting. We had a number of people who were in favor of option 1. We had some people who were in favor of option 3. So kind of taking a middle ground, we're going with option 2 as the staff recommendation. I'm going to show you some pictures just so you kind of see what this looks like. I'm going to note a couple of things as I do that. So this is option 1, showing a quadplex and showing 4 spaces. And this is, assuming an alley served lot. And it assumes a certain configuration for those parking spaces. It assumes they're kind of directly off the alley. I'll show you the next 2, and then I'll kind of talk about that a little bit more. So if we've got option 2, you've still got enough space at the back of the lot to fit those spaces without kind of bumping up against setback provisions. The other issue is your requirements for circulation for developments of, I think right now it's 4 or more units that you have maneuvering area there to be able to head in and head out. So I'm going to show you this last graphic and then talk about that a little bit more. So this is option 3, the one that would still reduce the requirement a little bit, but require the most amount of parking. So you would, and that takes up almost the entire width of the lot if you're allowing for, which we're recommending, a 60-foot lot width for quadplexes. Basically, in this parking configuration, it makes it kind of impossible to do the maneuvering area to head in, head out. Now, you could kind of either do a couple of things with that parking area to make that possible. One, you could scoot it towards the unit. That kind of reduces, it kind of breaks up that open space in the backyard, but it would give you the maneuvering area. Or you kind of flip it 90 degrees so the parking spaces are facing the side interior lot line. That would give you some space. And that would be the same with any of these 3 options I showed you. I think the point here is that the more parking spaces you require, the more challenging it is to meet those requirements, the more it takes up space on the lot with the parking in the maneuvering area. And again, kind of what we heard from you as a group wasn't total consensus, but it was some, again, recommendations for option 1, which would be the fewest number of spaces, some for the larger. And so for all of those reasons, we're recommending option 2. which is this one. And again, you could think about that parking being flipped. Wouldn't have to be in that configuration. So I want to see if what you think of the staff recommendation, or if you're still kind of feeling the same way that you felt the last time we talked about this. Again, we'll see if we get everybody in agreement, and if not, we'll move forward either way, noting how many people, said what. So I will stop talking there and just see. We might want to maybe just go around the group and see what y'all think. And Brent, I'll let you moderate that. But yeah,
happy to facilitate. Okay, let's start with. Was there anyone that would like to go first and discuss this first? I'll leave it open to that. If not, I can start calling on everyone.
I'm happy.
Can you say again? Excuse me. Can you say again what option 2 is?
Yeah, it's what I've got up on the screen right now. So it's required 2 spaces.
I can see the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I forgot. Yes, so I will say it. Sorry. But it's basically required 2 spaces for the first unit and 1 space for each additional unit. So that's requiring, a little more parking for triplexes and quadplexes. Well, it's actually requiring a little less per unit. No, it's requiring a little more per unit than what you require for duplexes per the administrative rules. It's requiring something kind of similar to what you require for multifamily, although it really depends on 5 or more units, depends on how big the development is, how many units, and a little less than what you're requiring for single family detached on a per unit basis. So, but it's more than 1 space per unit, I guess I would also say.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Would it be possible to change the code so to allow back out parking along alleyways? That would probably solve a lot of the problem, at least in the downtown area where most of the lots have alley access.
I mean, I think it would be possible to allow for that, and it would solve the back out problem. I guess what it wouldn't do would be to address all the other reasons that we talked about previously for reducing the number of parking spaces required. And again, we probably had somewhere around, I want to say 3 or 4 commissioners who advocated for the lowest number, and then 2 or 3 who advocated for higher numbers. So
it would save a great deal of space, though, especially for the smaller developments if internal maneuvering space wasn't required.
Yeah,
we currently allow for that today. So yeah, that's what he's showing up on the slide. He's showing the backing space and the maneuvering space in the alley. So yeah, that's something we allow today.
So for 1 and 2 single and two unit families, but 3 or more would require it to not maneuver in the right of way.
So we could change it. We could change it to be only for 5 or more units that you required that. And so then for triplexes and quadplexes, yeah, it would allow for this, what we're showing on the screen.
I'm happy to go first with an opinion.
Okay, go ahead, Philip.
I prefer option 1 because I think it is more development friendly, and again, being in a city with tight urban growth boundary, I think increasing density is what really is kind of the path into the future. I also think that on all levels, creating a situation that supports multimode transportation and that doesn't do everything to encourage more car traffic is another smart move. And the Dalles has a far way to go there. We're not a very bike and walk friendly town. And so I support anything that will move us in that direction. Having said that, if we find in the end that we cannot come to a majority agreement, I would be happy to compromise on option 2 if that's the way forward on a unanimous or at least majority decision. Thanks.
I think this is going to end up coming down to a vote, and I'm kind of prepared for that. So we'll most likely be doing that once everyone is able to provide their opinion. I'll go after the commissioners. I want to hear everyone else's input as well. Let's go to Cody.
So I'm kind of with Philip, actually. I'm fine with just the 4 spaces, mostly because I feel bad for the 4 people. This is a ridiculous opinion, but I feel bad for the 4 people that are going to be arguing over that 5th space. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I'm fine with 4 spaces, 1 per unit. But again, I'm happy to go with staff recommendation of option 2. And when it comes to that vote, we'll just see how that goes.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Carly. Are you ready? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree with Cody and Philip. I would just echo what they're saying, with the one caveat being that with triplexes and quadplexes that we do have allowances for alley access to not have to eat into additional parking. I think ultimately the least amount of square footage that's required for parking is going to encourage more development. So I would be happy with either option. And Cody, I could not agree more with you with that fighting. I could see also who's going to shovel that 5th spot if they're not going to park there. Could also be a quite comical neighborhood debate. So.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so I'd be fine with 1 or 2.
Okay.
I have to admit, I had not thought of either of those things, so I appreciate you guys bringing them up.
Well, we hear plenty of it around town, especially during the winter when everyone's cruising around on their 4-wheelers, plowing the streets. Okay, let's go to Alan next.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that all 3 of these options are a huge improvement to what's in our code currently. And a lot of the quadplexes that I see getting built have garages anyway. So you've got the garage and the 20 feet required in front of it. So you're going to have 2 spots regardless. So I'm not sure it really matters what the requirement is in a lot of cases. So I'm on board for option 2.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Let's go to Linda.
Okay, parking is a real issue for me because I live across the street from 2 houses that there is no off-street parking. And one of the houses, there are 5 people that live in there that each have a car. The other one, there are 2 people and there's 3 vehicles. So I would just be happy if there was one parking space per unit. So I guess I go with option 1.
Okay. All right, thank you, Linda. Let's go to Mark next.
I guess I would still prefer option 3, 1.5 per unit. Each parking space is only going to take up about 180 square feet. I just don't think you're saving that much land, and it's just going to create parking headaches down the road. Usually you're going to have at least 1 vehicle for each working person in a family. And I just don't think it's going to work if you only have 1 or 1.25 spaces per unit. I guess if I had to choose between the other 2, I'd probably go with option 2.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mark. Okay, I think I got through everyone. If I didn't, speak up. My opinion, I am a huge fan of people being able to choose what they want to be able to do. One thing that I hope is made clear through all this, especially when it goes to city council, is that these are just options. This isn't necessarily something that people are always going to choose to do. They may decide to add more parking if they want to. They have that option. But if they also want to drop it down and go to the minimum that's required, they have that option as well. And I'm a huge fan of creating more buildable space, especially on lots that were created in subdivisions in the early 1900s, mid 1900s, that didn't account for the development that we're seeing nowadays, and that we're having to work around and try to figure out how we're going to fit development into these spaces. So I would be supportive of option 1. If it went to option 2, I would also be supportive of that. But I would prefer option 1. Yeah. So it kind of sounds like we're all on this. Do I even need to take a vote, Matt? Did you get a good clear?
I mean, so what I heard was 5 folks in favor out of the 7 in favor of option 1, 1 option 2, and 1 option 3. I would be, so had you taken a vote, you'd have a majority of you supporting option 1. So I would think that's what we would move forward with.
Okay. Do the commissioners have any concern with that?
Not me.
Okay. I think you got your direction, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Since, we can never spend enough time talking about parking. I've got, sorry, one more parking question. So we also talked last time about parking for townhomes, and the question of whether or not, so that's, single family attached where the units are each on their own lot, individual lots per unit, which is, to distinguish it from a triplex or a quadplex where all the units are on the same lot. But they can often look the same, that those developments often look essentially the same from the street or from the air or the ground or whatever. So the question here was, right now, we require 2 spaces per unit. Do we want to reduce that to 1 space per unit? And some of the discussion we had last time were things to think about. One is the thing that I can't remember, I think it was Alan mentioned that particularly with townhomes, what you often see in terms of how they get developed is a garage and a space in front. So the market tends to deliver that for a lot of townhomes. Probably will continue to do that. But if you only required 1 space per unit, then there would be the ability to just have a garage, pull the unit up closer to the street, or not have a garage but have a driveway in front, whatever. And then there's all kind of the same things that people brought up with the parking requirements for triplexes and quadplexes. The other thing that we noted on here is shared parking arrangements, simply because here we don't think it's really viable to suggest a 1.5 spaces or something with townhome development, because that would require there to be some shared parking, some space for shared parking, and it just makes the development more complicated to plan for, permit, and sell. So I don't think that's really a viable option here. So same kind of question, a little different, but similar. Should we reduce the requirement to 1 space per unit, or keep it at 2? And I would suggest maybe, again, going around the screen and seeing what people think.
Okay. Let's start with, if you're ready, Cody.
Yeah. Don't townhomes have a setback, a regular setback like everything else anyway? 15 feet from the street or whatever it is. So I mean, you couldn't bring a townhome all the way up to the
good point.
Street anyway, right?
Well, and there's also the option, I think, design option, instead of having a bunch of snout houses, having garages on the rear side of the structure as well.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm fine with also reducing it to one, because I think by default there has to be one. Just
So Cody, to add to
Right.
that, the setback for residential zones for the front is actually 10 feet. So 10 feet
Got
is
it.
not adequate for a parking space. Usually it's 18 to 20 is what we look for a driveway or for driveway parking.
got it. I think that townhomes should have one parking spot.
Okay. And then next on the list is Commissioner Miller.
One,
One. Okay.
yes.
Simple answer. Let's go to Mark next.
Well, I guess I'm still in favor of more than one parking place. Townhome's going to have at least a 20 to 25 foot wide lot. You should be able to get 2 parking spaces on that off of an alley without any problem.
Okay. And we'll go to Alan next.
I have a question. So with townhomes, can you just do as many as you want next to each other and still call it a townhome?
Yeah, I don't think you guys have a limit on the number of attached units in your code. Is that right, Don?
Correct. We used to have 3 to 8 units. It was defined, but that was removed.
So, I mean,
So,
ultimately,
yeah.
it depends on the block size. That's essentially what's going to limit it.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I worry a little bit about, but with a fourplex, you're saying it's going to be 4 dwellings and 4 parking spots. Well, if you get to 10 of them and with only 10 spots, I actually don't think that's enough parking. I think you need to have more.
Okay. So you'd be in favor of keeping it at 2 spaces per unit?
Well, I guess I am a little conflicted about that. It just, I guess the definition of a townhome is maybe what we need to look at. I know that
Excuse me, is 10th and Cherry Heights, are those townhomes?
Or
So, correct. So Linda, those are 10th and Mount Hood.
Mount Hood.
Yeah,
10th and Mount Hood, yeah.
Yes, so those are actually on individual lots, and they are common wall construction, single family homes. So yes, so they would be considered townhouses based on the style. But they all are on their own individual lot. They're not a fourplex.
Thank you.
Yes.
So could we say something like one per unit up to a certain amount of units together, and then some additional parking required at some point? Or I guess that you'd have to have a shared parking arrangement in that case, huh?
Yeah, you could, and that's kind of what you'd need to end up with if it was a larger townhome development.
Yeah, and then you'd be running, if each townhome was on its own individual lot, so that the sale of the home could go
Right.
separate, then there'd be shared parking areas in
Right.
relation to the development versus on-street parking.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm a little conflicted on this one.
And then you start running into who's going to shovel them, like our conversation earlier,
Right.
or whoever, who's
Yeah.
going to clear them out.
An HOA.
Yeah.
I have one slight comment. Our code calls out, it's a bit conflicting. It calls out townhomes 3 to 8 units in 2 of our sections, but the actual definition of an attached of a townhome does not have a number on it. So I don't know if that helps out the conversation at all.
Okay.
Maybe it means we missed something on the cleanup amendments.
I think you're correct, Matt. I think that was supposed to be removed. So
Still time. Well, I think we can put you down as kind of because conflicted or not.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to Carly next.
I would just say one parking space. It's hard for me to understand how we would require more for a townhome when we only require one for a duplex. That's kind of that clear and objective part of the code, I think, is what I'd rather err on the side of caution with that.
Okay. I appreciate that input. Philip?
Same here, consistency, and other than that, it's the same discussion as we had about the multiplexes before. So I'm for one.
Okay, perfect. And I think I got through everyone. If I didn't, yell at me, and I'll let you go.
You did.
Okay. I'm in favor of one. Again, consistency across the board. I'll agree with Philip and Carly. In that folks also have the option of including more. They have the option of adding on a garage. They have the option of including 2 parking spaces if they want to with development. And we're not going to see this change drastically within a short period of time. It's not like all of a sudden all townhomes are going to have 1 parking space. It's going to be as development occurs over time and things move on over time. So, okay.
All right. I'd say the same thing I said with the last question. We get 5 for 1, and so that's a clear majority of you all, and that's what we would take forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Are there any concerns from commissioners? All right, move on.
Okay. The next one here is we did, I think, talk about this a little bit last time, but maybe not in quite as much detail as this slide shows. So one of the things we talked about was reducing the height requirement for triplexes and quadplexes to 35 feet. I think we might have shown you this graphic that also was the idea of, for those types of units, essentially, so there's 2 things to think about here. What we'd suggested in the code amendments was that you've got these different design options for those kinds of housing, and one of the design options is to have would be to have the maximum height of the low point of the eave be at 25 feet if you've got a pitched roof. And you could have, we talked with staff about what's this do with dormers. He said, well, that's okay. We just have to clarify that you can have a dormer, but the main eave would be max height 25 feet. So this could be an option. One of the things you could meet as part of your menu of design standards, or you could require this for triplexes and quadplexes. And essentially that would mean you wouldn't be able to have a flat roof triplex or quadplex that was 35 feet tall. So we wanted to get some more feedback on this because we had some more staff discussion about it and we didn't really present it in enough detail last time we talked to y'all. So we wanted to talk to you about it some more today. So what do you think of this idea? Either A, as something that would simply apply to triplexes and quadplexes, pitched roofs, max height of the building 35 feet, but max height of the lower part of the eave 25 feet, or this is an option that you could use to meet design standards, but you wouldn't apply it to everywhere or to all of those structures. So, thoughts on this one?
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
So with option 1, if it was a flat roof, would that allow the flat roof to be at 35, or what would happen?
That's what we're suggesting. And with that, we'd already suggested and talked about reducing the max height for these dwellings in these zones from 40 feet down to 35 feet. And I think we'd gotten pretty good agreement on that. The question is, do we want to go a little further than that? And I think, the idea behind this is it just kind of reduces the mass, but it also means you wouldn't be able to have a flat roof, which means that, most likely you've got kind of a 2-story structure with maybe kind of a half third story if you had dormers up there. So
just to clarify that part. So option 1 pretty much allows only 2-story buildings. Option 3 or 2 allows for 3-story buildings. Is that correct? But only if they have a flat roof?
Well, kind of practically speaking, yes. But again, I think you could get a 3rd story with a pitched roof if you had dormers, you know, and if the, yeah. So I don't know if it's a totally cut and dried answer to that question.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for Matt?
Well,
I was just going to ask a question, and I'm forgetting the rationale from why we decided the 5 feet distinction. So can you refresh my memory? I apologize.
Well, it's kind of, if you see on the right side graphic, 40 feet for a triplex or a quadplex on a smaller lot like this, pretty big building in terms of just the massing of it compared to the surrounding kind of single family detached homes in an existing neighborhood. And so the suggestion was to bring that down to 35 feet. We're allowing kind of housing types already. We've reduced the lot width requirements. We've reduced the lot size requirements. And so to kind of counter that a little bit, just in terms of the mass and scale of them, we suggested reducing the height requirement or the maximum height allowed from 40 feet to 35 feet. And people seem to think, yeah, that made sense. That was a good idea. And so the question is, should we further reduce that, either generally, or, you know, should we kind of give that as an option for folks as one way to meet the city's design standards for those types of dwellings in these zones? Did that answer the question? That makes sense?
Thank you for that refresher.
Yes, no worries. We didn't spend a lot of time on this one previously, but a little.
Miller has a question.
Okay.
Miller has a question. So is that 35 feet from street up?
Yeah, it's from the,
or
basically from the ground, from the I guess called the finished grade, right?
Well,
the top of the house.
The building I'm in is not on at street level. It's up off the street, high.
Yeah, it's from the grade of the property. It's from the elevation of the property.
Yep. 5 foot perimeter of the property or of where the structure is.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And if it's on a slope, then there's more.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's more measurements. Yeah.
But just generally speaking, yeah.
So have we done the math on if we reduced it down to 35, what the height of each floor level would be roughly?
I mean, it's.
I could probably add something to that. In general construction, your floors are going to the floor structure is going to be about a foot. But if you have multiple units on different levels, you're probably going to want to have a false ceiling for soundproofing purposes. So that could add another 6 inches to a foot. So you're probably looking at 9 to 10 feet per story.
So 35 is going to give you a 3-story building, essentially. You know, if you have flat, then if it's a pitched roof, 2 to 2.5.
Okay. Okay, that makes
So
sense.
to me, what's striking here is when this graphic, I really don't like the looks of the graphic to the right. It looks like a bunker, but of course, it's just a very simple graphic that is just an example. But the pitched roof construction seems to go much better with the style of the Dells. However, then I think about the fairly prevalent style of building in Hood River these last few years, which is, again, because of density issues, fairly vertical. And in many cases, they're able to pull that off and make it look not like a bunker, make it look more like a stretched out bungalow type of a thing. So I'm still kind of struggling to understand, are we talking about a difference of a floor, or are we just saying that, well, in both options, 3 floors are possible, but in option 1, the 3rd floor would be much reduced in size because it would have a sloping roof? Or am I misreading that?
I think
I could jump in real quick. Sorry to interrupt, Matt. When Cascadia produced these graphics and pitched them to us, they were framing this particular design as 2.5 stories. So I think you're kind of on the right track, Philip, that that pitched roof portion would be a partial story. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, and I'll just say I have a house that's got essentially a partial 3rd story. It's got a pitched roof. It's got a dormer in the front. It's head high, and it's 35 feet or less, and it's head high in the middle. But I got to hunker down when I come up the stairs so I don't bang my head on the ceiling. So, you know, and I've seen houses that, and it's more expensive to do it, of course, but that have 4 dormers, and then it's almost, you know, it's almost a 3rd full story. It's like a 3/4 or so.
Okay, so the answer you're trying to get, Matt, is whether or not to keep it at 40 or go down to 35 or even go further.
Well, I think we already agreed 35 was a good idea. I think the question is, do we want to essentially either require pitched roofs or say that a pitched roof is one of the design options, so it kind of incentivizes it a little bit, but doesn't require it.
Okay.
I think those are kind of the couple of options.
Okay, so we're good on the height. We're just mainly worried about whether we'd allow pitched or flat roofs.
Yeah, exactly.
And in a lot of those newer designs, it seems like, and I don't know if I'm using the right terminology here, but they are flat roofs at an angle. Is that just a pitched roof, or almost kind of like a shed roof, you know?
Right. Yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. That is a good question. I mean, I think, so we're showing, you know, the low part of the eave being at 25 feet. So if you had a roof like that, and at the back, the low part of the eave was at 25 feet, then it would meet this requirement essentially.
Okay. Well, I think that actually makes quite a difference, because all of a sudden you're going from, which the simple design here is showing, a situation where you only have standing height in the middle to where you have standing height in half of the upper space.
Yeah,
So
you could have it sort of across the front, and the rear part could be taller vaulted ceiling or something like that.
Yeah.
So like I've said before, I'm a fan of folks having options. I would probably say just keep it in there in case people choose to go that route. That'd be my choice. Let's go around so we can wrap up this discussion. It sounds like Philip sounded like you were a little bit decided as well.
Yes, I agree with your point, Brent.
Okay, and let's go to Mark.
I would be in favor of keeping the sidewalls at 25 feet. That would allow more light to get down between buildings. And you could still get, you know, a 3rd story, especially if you had a daylight basement on the lowest level.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mark. Linda?
35 pitch roof.
Okay. So not in favor of a flat roof?
Not really.
Okay, that's understandable. Okay, Cody.
I am in favor with what you said, Brent. I think it's fine as it is, and if someone wants to build it that way, as long as they adhere to the other design standards, I think that, or variation of the other design standards will still look okay.
Okay. And then Alan?
Even though I prefer the pitch roof, I agree with what you said about having the flexibility, and that's the way I would go, is allowing it.
Okay. And Carly?
I agree with the flexibility.
Okay.
All right. I think that gives me enough, or gives us enough on that one too. So.
All right. Perfect.
So, sorry to make you all become architects for the night, but hopefully it wasn't too painful. All right. We're almost done. Just kind of a quick rundown of most of the cleanup code amendments that we talked about previously, and then there'll be one where we ask you a question. So these are the things we talked about previously that are, things that mostly staff noted as just ought to get cleaned up to clarify things in the code, reduce confusion, et cetera. One, adding some definitions. Two, removing that small lot single family provision from the code because it doesn't ever really get used and it's confusing. Replacing building with dwelling when we're talking about dwelling structures. Clarifying density requirements to be consistent with what the comprehensive plan says. Adding the existing design standards for the RH and the RL zone to the RM zone for, again, consistency there. And then revising setbacks for accessory dwellings to allow for zero lot line development there. So those are things we all talked about and seem to think we're okay. So any questions before we cover our last item here where we have a question for you? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna go on to the last one. Now this is one where I'm gonna actually rely on Dawn and or Josh to talk us through this one. And we might have talked about this one in a previous meeting, but we added some good graphics here to kind of describe what we're talking about. So I'm gonna stop and say, Dawn or Josh, whoever drew the short straw, take it away.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start off and give a little bit of a description. So what you see on the map is our sub-districts for the CBC zone. And CBC 1 is actually the areas located in the Triplex Historic District, as well as our Central Business Commercial. The area zoned in the green, that's identified as green, is actually our CBC 3, which is basically every area excluding CBC 1 and 2. And then CBC 2 zone is our core downtown. So that has the parking exemption allowances, et cetera. So as you can see there, some of the properties located in CBC 1 are also located in the CBC 2, the core downtown. So those are mostly or predominantly the commercial historic district. So what we had talked about is looking to allow for multifamily dwellings to be allowed in these CBC zone. So currently our code allows for all dwellings that were either permitted or originally built as a single family home can remain and be allowed as a single family home, and or like if there's a modification, a dwelling can be added or multifamily as long as the ground floor is a permitted commercial use. So in the two pictures below, and I apologize for the large tree, there is a garage that's the kind of a blue and white, and then the picture just to the next to that is actually the house in the front. There we go, thanks. So we had an applicant come to our or make a request to modify that existing single family home that was used as a bed and breakfast for years, but it was predominantly a single family home, to modify that into a multifamily unit. And our current code did not allow for that to happen. It could be used as a single family, but it would not allow for the multifamily. So we're looking at making the change to allow for that. the accessory structure. So what they're doing right now is waiting for the potential code change for a couple potential options where it's either going to be accessory dwelling units, or if we make the change to allow for multifamily, that is what they're looking to see what the decision is at City Council, Planning Commission to City Council. Now, Josh, do you want to jump in on the Liberty House?
Yeah, thanks, Don. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a house. It's not the best picture for you, but an individual came to us and they wanted to add an addition. It's currently a single-family dwelling. And they wanted to add an additional dwelling to the property. And this is the same issue that we have. So they wanted to take this single family home and turn it into a duplex. And they are restricted from doing that unless they add a commercial element to the downstairs floor of that building. And I mean, we can all look at it and realize that seems difficult, kind of a ridiculous task to meet. So they were then coming to me and essentially asking, what's the smallest commercial space I can put into my building just to meet this requirement? So, we felt that, taking away that ground floor commercial would allow an individual to go through and make kind of an obvious change to this building. It's going to stay residential. You won't add a commercial element to it. And be pretty easy for them. Right now, they're technically restricted from doing so unless they add an office downstairs.
And so, I would agree. If something, it'd be one thing if something was commercial, switching to residential, but requiring an already fully established residential use to switch to commercial. That seems like a bit of an overreach. And we'll go around. Sorry, go ahead.
Josh or Don, you want to talk about the two options here and kind of the staff?
Oh yeah, I can't. Sorry, I was just thinking about that. So the two options would be, option one is essentially just taking away the permitted commercial use for everything that you see that's in a color here. So the entire CBC zone would allow for residential units. However, staff is in support of option two, which essentially maintains sub-district 2 as our primary commercial use. So therefore, if it's in sub-district 2, which is in the hashed area, that would require that the downstairs be a commercial use. The upstairs could be converted to residential. Everything outside of sub-district 2, which we said is primarily, when it was built out early on, that's primarily more residential units. It would allow all of them to convert without having this commercial component to it. So,
are you basically talking 4th Street?
yeah. So 4th Street to 1st, and then Liberty to Jefferson. That box is our CBC 2 zone. So as you can think of the buildings in there, primarily commercial buildings.
So yes, Linda, and also going out like 3rd place towards 6th Street Bridge, that would be the area that we would allow for, or that we're recommending to allow conversions to multifamily.
Okay.
Yeah. I am assuming the two specific examples you cited would benefit from either one of these options, or is it specifically option 2?
Well, they would benefit from both.
Both, right?
Yeah, they would benefit from both. Yeah.
Right. So, Carly, to answer your question, what are the reason or the rationale for us looking towards or leaning towards option 2 is providing that protection for that core downtown, for Main Street, the Dalles, and pretty much which consists mostly of commercial type buildings, and requiring allowing residential, but that would have to be 2nd story or above, but still protecting that 1st Street or the street level at a commercial use.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that a little. I mean, there are lots of examples in that area of beautiful and well-working residential buildings that are all residential, some of them beautiful historic buildings. And so if we opened it up to allow for residential there, I mean, downtown is always going to be very attractive for commercial. I can't see a mad rush for residential development that would push out the commercial. That just doesn't seem like it's anywhere near any market dynamics. So I'm wondering why are we trying to protect commercial? Are we feeling like commercial is going to be crowded out or something? To me, it seems like a downtown that has a healthy mix of commercial and residential is a really good thing. And in fact, we don't have enough residential downtown. I mean, ask any of the small businesses, especially the retail businesses there, they all would love more residential. There's no question. And again, for walkability, livability, it seems to me that a more evenly mixed use of the downtown area would be of benefit. With the staff recommendation, what are your concerns with adding more residential to the mix of downtown development?
I'm not sure. Alice, are you jumping in? Sorry.
Well, I think I can jump in here. I think we've been wanting to honor the tradition of preserving the core of the downtown to be a commercial core and to not allow land uses to come in, sort of eat away at that. But your point is well taken, because you make a really good point that it might be fine to allow for ground floor residential, because as you said, there may not be a mad rush anyway. So I guess I'm compelled by that. I'd be interested in hearing what other people think from a market perspective. What we want to make sure is that it's a walkable downtown, that there's enough enough storefronts that people can feel like they can stroll and get what they need, and that that the retail core can be well supported. So I guess I'm open to your thoughts. And did you want to add anything, Dawn or Josh, to what I just said?
No, I think that's great. And also I kind of didn't throw in the additional caveat. So anything that is located in a historic district also has design guidelines and regulations. So Philip, your comment, absolutely, it's not going to be a rush and or a modification to have something that doesn't fit or meet design guidelines or features of a historic district would not be allowed. So that was a good point.
Yeah, and if I may just add to Alice's comments, which I appreciate, a walkable downtown to me is defined by a healthy mix of residential and commercial. We all know the all commercial areas that require car trips to go there. We have that on the west side, and the traditional strip mall is kind of the prime example of that. And I think that's pretty far from anything that any of us would call a walkable downtown. So again, to me, it just seems like a good mix of residential and commercial is a really good thing. And I would be amazed if the small business owners of many of the retail businesses downtown wouldn't agree with that.
And maybe what to kind of elaborate on Alice's comments is this is kind of it is opening up opportunities for multifamily or modifications to existing residential structures, are allowing for it in those other two outlying areas. And just maybe it's more of a conservative approach rather than just opening it all up for ground floor residential. Just kind of a baby step.
Well, but the reason I'm compelled by it is that we're finding, I think we're hearing about this all over in the media, and then just the real estate trends, is that just given online shopping and everything, that that retail spaces, especially in downtowns, might want to be smaller. They might want to be wide, but not as deep, you know, and in some of our older spaces that are existing, we have maybe a narrow, deep space. And in fact, we know of, I can think of 3 right off the top of my head in the downtown where there are people living on the ground floor behind their businesses or in conjunction with their businesses. So they're living there, and we don't say anything because they have a storefront, and it's all good, you know, but this would make it legal, because maybe that will be the future of our downtown. So I kind of like the flexibility of what Philip is saying. And it might be worthwhile if you all make a recommendation. I like this flexibility. We could also get, in the meantime, though, we need to keep moving with this, but we would want to get some feedback maybe from a leasing agent like Brian Lauterbach or Charlie Foote or some other people that can give us some real estate perspective on this. And you are, I'm talking about commercial real estate. Philip, I know you have some experience here too. And Cody, you're commercial real estate as well. So we would really want to hear your perspective on this and maybe get some other opinions when we get to council.
Before we go, I'm gonna go. Sorry, Linda, we're gonna go around the horn in a second. I'll go to you first once I'm done. One thing that I would be interested in is hearing what other jurisdictions are doing, and not necessarily large jurisdictions like Portland or any areas that we are heavily, you know, that we're not alike at all. Maybe communities like that have the same population. Maybe see how they're handling these amendments and see what they're doing with their downtowns. If they're opening it up for residential development, or if they're trying to maintain those commercial spaces as well. It may be good to look for examples in that realm as well, on top of talking to leasing agents and real estate professionals.
We could come back to you with some thoughts on that.
Okay, Linda.
Okay, so having grown up here in the 50s and the 60s, retail core was 2nd and 3rd Street. There was no West Side as far as the retail. And so a lot of people a lot of residents here that in my age group and slightly younger consider retail core 2nd and 3rd Street. 4th Street and the 3rd Street from Lincoln West, that's residential. That's my opinion.
Perfect. Thank you, Linda. Let's go to Mark next.
I have no objection to allowing residential in the downtown area. And Linda's right. A lot of that area, particularly along 4th Street, was traditionally residential to begin with. And even if they do convert the first floor to residential, it can be converted back at a later date if there's a demand for it.
That's a good point. Cody?
Sorry. I'm all for allowing more flexibility in terms of residential use in zones 1 and zones 3, but also to existing homes in zone 2. You know?
Okay.
That's what I think. I mean, like, well, I don't know. No, I think I would correct that. I think I would just be open to residential use in all CBC zones to the degree that is described here as option 2. So I would just add subdistricts 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
And I don't think that 4B, I don't think that B should be a requirement. Well,
So, and if that's the case, I think you'd basically be supporting option 1.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say to you. I think
Oh, got it. Okay.
you're modifying option 2 to make it option 1.
Okay, perfect. Then I'm going with option 1.
Okay. Carly, if you're ready, I can go next.
No, sorry. I would actually, I'm in support of option 1. I've lived in a neighborhood similar to what downtown could be, and I think currently downtown doesn't have enough residential to keep it balanced. And I would say if we're looking for a community that is similar to us for some ideas of how they're handling it, I'd love for us to maybe take a peek at Astoria and see how Astoria is handling their commercial. They're balancing the commercial and residential. It seems to be blending pretty seamlessly. So I'm all for option 1.
Okay. And who have I not called on? Alan?
Yeah, I haven't gone. I guess I was leaning towards option 2. Maybe I'm the only one. I just think it's important to preserve the downtown that we have, the way, maybe not exactly the way it is, but you know, it adds a lot of character to the Dalles. And I think that option 2 does bring more residential into there, just maybe not quite as much.
Okay. And so have I gotten everybody? It seems like it. And for the record, I would lean towards option 1. If that gives you folks direction. Or commissioners, do you feel like it would be good to come back with some additional information from leasing agents and possibly look at other jurisdictions, or do you feel like this is enough to move forward on? I'll say, if you feel like it's not enough to move forward on, speak up.
All right. I'm going to say the majority of you are in favor of option 1. I think we can still come back and say, here's what we've seen in other places, but we'd move forward, at least in terms of the code amendments we bring forth with option 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I comment in real quick? I don't want to support. I know it's up to the commission. I'm not trying to support staff's decision on number 2. I just, it's almost sounding like the conversation was leaning toward a restriction of residential in CBC 2, and that's not the case. So we are talking about residential would be permitted in all 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors of every building in the CBC 2 zone. Option 1 would then allow for a single family home to be built right downtown on 2nd Street.
I kind of can't imagine you'd see any new ones built down there. But.
Right. And well, and just also to add, not to, but historic districts they would have to also, so either one of those that are in CBC 1, like the overlap area in the CBC 2, would still be required to meet historic design guidelines and review, which there's a big finding requiring it to be used what it was historically used as, and a residence right in the middle of downtown wouldn't meet those criteria.
But it wouldn't. Can I just add that if you wanted to make your very long, narrow storefront, you wanted to live in the back, you could, and you could still have the storefront.
Correct. Not modification versus a new build. Yeah, absolutely, Alice.
Okay, quick question. So the lot that is on the northeast corner of 4th and I think Lincoln, used to be a triplex.
Correct.
Sorry, I think I'm getting a little mixed up in the details. Which option would allow for a triplex to just be built there again?
So that was originally a triplex. So historically built as a triplex existing, that would then be, we would allow for replacement of that triplex. So let's say it was a single family home. This would, option 2 would allow that to be rebuilt as a multifamily because that's in Triplex Historic District. But if it was, let's say that we moved it over a couple blocks and it was in CBC 2, that wouldn't be allowed is what option 2 is saying.
Okay, got it. Okay.
I'm still going to assume we're moving forward with option 1.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And
Unless
that's
I hear a majority of you change your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? I hope it's a
Sure.
quick one.
Why not?
If we think about Tony's, would option 1 allow for Tony's, as an example, to be all residential without commercial?
Correct.
Yeah, yes.
And option 2 would not, correct? Because
Correct.
yeah, okay.
right.
So I think that's a really good argument right there. I'm not pushing for that huge structure to be all residential, but I think if that is what a developer decided was the most reasonable thing to do, I don't think that would be a blemish on downtown to have a larger number of apartments there. In fact, I think that would address some of the housing issues we have. So that's a good example for me to kind of shed light on the differences between the two. Thank you.
And that's an example today with today's building configuration where you have long narrow, and there might be an opportunity with today's building, and we won't have today's building, but to have a unit in the back, So, and that would be allowed in this option 1.
All right. Are we good to go on this one?
Option 1.
Okay. All right. So that was the last sort of substantive thing for y'all. And the last thing we have up here is next steps. So we've got our second online open house and survey up. Tell all your friends, neighbors, family to get on there and look at it and respond to the questions on there. We're planning on keeping that open through May 9th. So that's kind of going on now. And we'll have a summary of the results of that for the next meeting with you all. And at the same time, we'll be preparing the adoption ready code updates consistent with the discussion that we had this evening. So moving forward on that. And then the next meeting with you all will be a hearing to potentially recommend adoption of that to the city council. So, we haven't, as staff and consultant team, talked too much about that other than, I think we'll want to have a brief presentation. It won't be, it'll be a hearing. So for the benefit of the public, mostly you guys have heard all this already, right? But for the benefit of the public, we'll want to talk about here's what we're proposing, and we'll all put our heads together, Alice and Don and Josh and Brandon and I, figure out how best to present that at the hearing. But that's sort of the immediate next step. And then again, city council hearing scheduled to take it to them on the 14th, and then with the second hearing as needed on the 28th. Yeah, so that's where we're headed.
And I just wanted to promote, I see that Chair Bybee, you might want to invite public comment. We've gotten a couple comments from Mr. Nichols, and he might want to say something besides include something in the chat. So we might open that up if you'd like to. But I also wanted to promote with Mr. Nichols and with the community, please, we want as much participation as we can on this survey. And some of the questions that we've asked and answered here today, such as parking and attached versus detached duplexes, we're asking for feedback on these questions and would welcome all of you sending this out to your networks and having your coworkers, for instance, people in your real estate firm or maybe in the Wasco County Planning Department or other workplaces to share it and have people that live and work in the Dalles participate in this as widely as possible.
Oh, it's already been filtered through our department already, so don't worry about that. Roger, did you have any comments you wanted to add? You did throw a couple things in the chat. I wanted to allow you an opportunity for that.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. You're talking about thinking that there would never be a residential in the 2nd or 3rd Street, but there is one home. It was built as a home, and John Prairie uses it. It's just as you come across beyond the old auto electric, the next home on the side of the street on the north hand side. So there has been some historic houses downtown. If you look back at the 1860s, 70s, 80s, there were living quarters on 2nd and 3rd Street because 1st Street was the main street way back when. So just mention historical fact. I don't think it enters into anything you've done today, but I just want to put that in the record. And by the way, I also say you guys were in a very efficient meeting. I really appreciated all the stuff you did and everybody's comments. So well done. And I'll be quiet now.
All right, thanks, Roger. I do have a question. What kind of outreach are we utilizing to get folks? Well, I mean, other than sending it out on social media platforms for the survey and whatnot, but I mean for the upcoming Planning Commission hearing where we're going to be covering everything that we've gone over with the public, what kind of outreach are we doing to get folks to attend that?
Chair, traditional outreach will be just exactly like you said. We're promoting the survey. We're going to be sending it out on social media. We are required for some of these lots, particularly those in the RH zone where it was a lower density for single family, or we bumped it up. We're going to have to send out what's called a ballot measure 56 zone notice, which is a notice required by state law when there's potential change to someone's property value. We need to send this special notice out. So we may get some additional interest that way. Sometimes that language in the required state notice is a little scary to property owners. I think in this case, they're actually going to be able to realize more investment on their property. But we will find a way to explain that while meeting state law. And it looks like Mr. Nichols has a question about that.
I just want to comment when you're talking about sending stuff out, please send it to us in the media as well. And I'm sure that's on your list, but not only myself at Gorge Country Media, but Mark Bailey at Bicoastal, and to Tom Peterson at his, and to Mark at Columbia Gorge News. So we're happy to help. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Roger. And I think Paula did actually email all our news contacts today with a survey at least. So that was done.
Great. I've been out of town this morning, so I didn't catch that. Thank you.
So those Measure 56 notices are scary to landowners sometimes, but speaking from experience at the county, they're effective, very effective.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold header. That's kind of what we need to make it say. So it's kind of a good warning sign. It's a little alarming.
Put it in just bold red. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I as much public input as we can get on this, just to be transparent, that would be my goal with all of this.
We in addition, with legislative hearings, we are required to put a notification in the paper. So it will go in the paper, and then as well as our media outlets. The unfortunate thing is it doesn't seem to get people as engaged, but I think that the Measure 56 will, like Ella said, will get some more input and people will notice that.
Awesome. Good. Okay. That's all I had. Were there any other questions towards any of the updates from commissioners? Because we're getting ready to call it here. So if there's any other questions or comments, feel free to speak up. I'm not hearing anything. We're at 7:20, and I will adjourn the hearing. All right.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good job.
Hey, Paula.
Yes, Brent.
How do you want to handle getting that resolution signed?
Well, are you okay with signing it electronically?
Yeah. If do you want me to keep an eye on my email tonight? I don't want to keep you too late. If you feel
well, I'm playing hooky tomorrow, so I would like to send it to you tonight.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll have to wait till Monday. Is that acceptable?
That's fine. Yeah, I will. I'll keep an eye on my email tonight then.
Okay. I'll also forward the minutes. Okay.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paula.
Bye-bye.
Bye.